is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. So I was just focusing on the fact that we are going from health and wellness to the seriously ill patient, but we're both talking about the GI tract. So my name is Dr. Swarna Balasurman, as Hall said, and I was a surgeon for 20 years, and we are solving a problem that maybe no one has really thought about, but I saw every day in my patients. And that's the problem of recovery after abdominal surgery, which is a long and miserable process if anyone's had it or had any family members had it. And what happens after you have abdominal surgeries, there's a period of time you're stuck in the hospital for basically 2 to 14 days waiting for your intestines to wake up. The longer the surgery, the longer the period of time. And you have a lot of complications. And this is a $30 billion problem, and there's a nearly $9 billion market here to solve this problem. The current standard of care is simply to let you lie in your hospital bed with an IV in your arm and wait for your intestines to sort of wake back up, so to speak. And these long hospital stays mean there's a missed opportunity for hospitals to put in a new surgery, which they get a lump sum payment for. And the secondary bigger problem is that when you're not eating, you're not healing. Protein is an essential element to healing, and this is why patients have so many complications. So our goal here with this device we call the Nolia Sleeve is to get patients from lying in bed watching the Food Network to eating and drinking faster and start the healing process. And in the process, we'll save 2 days in the hospital, saving $6,000 for the hospital in labor charges. And the shorter stay means they make more profit and get the patient out sooner and get a new patient in. So this is a therapeutic device to restart bowel function. So here's the device in situ in this diagram. You can see it inside the abdomen. This is a perioperative care device. So basically, the surgeon does not change anything about the way they do the surgery. They place this device inside the abdomen at the end of surgery and then use it for 6 hours, and then it's pulled out at the bedside. And I'll show you a little diagram of how that works. This device is a vacuum limiter. We use a vacuum source. So how does vacuum work to solve this ileus problem or this intestinal paralysis problem? What happens is during surgery, you end up with a lot of IV fluids. And those IV fluids, you have to take your rings off because they swell your fingers. Well, just like they swell your fingers, they swell your intestines. And when your intestines swell, that natural propulsion the nerves control just stop functioning. And when they don't function, the fluid that's naturally inside your intestines back up, and then you cannot eat or drink, and sometimes you're even vomiting. So this is the problem, essentially, in a nutshell. And what we do is remove that fluid using this device, using vacuum therapy to bring that fluid out. The inside of your abdomen is like the inside of your mouth, and restore that bowel function. If you look at these little video clips and focus on the one on the right, the beauty of this device is you use it at the end of surgery, takes 5 minutes to put in. And after you're done using it in 6 hours, you pull it out at the bedside. And patients tolerate this because there are no sharp nerve endings in the abdominal cavity. You simply use local around the exit site. Then the patient can eat and drink sooner. And we've shown this now in our first in human. But this is a good time to remind everyone that although I left practice and I lead this company full-time now, I could not do this without the help of a fantastic team here. And everyone here has had 10 to 35 years in medical devices, development and commercialization. And we have a great retinue of advisors as well, including people from Stanford Biodesign, where they studied post-op ileus very seriously. So as I mentioned, we've done our first in human study outside the US, and we were able to find out that patients tolerated having negative pressure therapy inside their body. They tolerated having the device removed at the bedside. And most importantly, we found out that compared to supportive care, these patients recovered their bowel function 2 days earlier. And that is a big step forward. So the market for this, there's about 2.9 million patients who develop this problem after surgery. But in addition to post-surgery, which is nearly every major abdominal surgery, people who have inflammatory infectious diseases of the GI abdominal tract basically end up with ileus as a secondary problem. So this is a large secondary market as well. And this device is easy to use, cheap to make, and there's opportunity around the world to make impact and also profit. And that brings us to the fact that this device at scale is under $300 to make. And, the value proposition here is that we save a hospital day. And a hospital day in the US is $3,000. And products that save a hospital day are priced at more than 50% of what they save. And so if we save 2 hospital days, which what we're currently showing, we could price this at $3,000. We also, in addition to the health economics, where we show that a single hospital using this in 3,000 cases could save $50 million, then we also apply for a new technology add-on payment code, and that will add a little cherry on top of the ice cream sundae. We've been at this a while, and we've taken several steps to de-risk the company. One serious step is to talk to the FDA. And although this would be a de novo device for an unmet clinical need, the FDA has agreed that using the negative pressure wound therapy predicates, we can file as a 510K, then do studies, and then ask for a marketing indication. And this really doesn't shorten the timeline as much as de-risk the company, since we don't hinge every clearance on the clinical trials itself. And then we're about 2.5 years from commercialization. We've been through several accelerators, won multiple prizes, and we're part of StartX, which has been an invaluable resource for us. Our plan would be to go to those large tertiary and quaternary centers where the large volume of complex abdominal surgery is done. The longer the surgery, the longer the period of ileus. And then these would be our first customers as well, and these KOLs would spread the word. We've been very capital efficient, under $4 million to get to the point we are. We're raising $1.4 million. The total cost to develop this device are under $30 million through Series B. Our plan would be to either exit to a large medical device company with an OR sales force or possibly to the wound care space. The data is really going to drive everything here. We show that items that save 1 hospital day are valued by the market, and that our data is going to drive the pricing strategy as well. Here we see that products that save 1 hospital day exited for $240 to $415 million with just less than 1 year after FDA clearance. And we already saved 2 hospital days, and we anticipate we can do the same or more. We have a device that's inexpensive to make, easy to use with a large market, and we've been super capital efficient. And lastly, we also have some interest from the U.S. military. I'd love to talk to you more about our raise. If you're interested in joining the journey to accelerate recovery after abdominal surgery, we're going to use $400K to further our clinical trial and our device efficacy and a 10 to 15 patient trial. And then the remainder will be continuing V&V testing for FDA clearance. Thank you so much. Happy to take your questions.
Great presentation, Swarna. Let's start with Cortland. Cortland, what's your questions?
First question is going to be, why are you moving away from why are you moving to a 510K rather than a de novo?
Great question. Well, if we had a de novo, we would have to have a clinical trial before we got that indication for ileus, since it's never been done before. And it's very difficult, since we're starting from scratch with an IDE trial, to predict the outcome. And we would spend a lot of time going back and forth with the FDA once we put out the goals to change, because we would probably end up having to change that goalpost. And it's just difficult to do because we don't have any data right now. We're starting from scratch, and our first data is really 2 days. And it's difficult to know exactly what direction we'll be. We'll have to try several other pilot trials and different surgeries to understand how best to pull our data going forward. The good news is the trials are quite short because they're just the day of surgery. And if we come back to the US, because it's a perioperative care device, we don't actually have to pay for the surgery itself. We're just paying for the device placement and removal. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I probably need to talk after this. My next question is, what about competition with the pharmaceuticals, especially for reduction of inflammation?
Right. Well, Takeda has been developing pharmaceuticals, but nothing has worked. They're the sort of the premier pharmaceutical company pursuing something in this area. There's good evidence that fluid is the source of the problem. And this device, actually, I developed it as seeing a side effect of another device. So I should tell you the backstory on this. There is a negative pressure wound therapy device that's used in open abdomens, and it's placed against the bowel as part of closing the wound as patients who have a major trauma or major sepsis. And one of the side effects I saw was those patients ate very quickly. And then the quest became, how do we bring this to all our patients, those without wounds? And so fluid is the source of the problem from that, but also we know that if we restrict fluids in patients who are having surgery, bowel function comes back very quickly, but with a 15 unpredictable side effect of kidney damage, acute tubular necrosis. So there is good evidence that fluid is the source of the problem and that inflammation may exist. It could be multifactorial, but it certainly seems like fluid is at least, I would say, at least 75, 80% of the problem. Does that answer your question, sir? Not really.
Yeah.
You don't look
probably
convinced.
Talk afterwards.
Sure. I can tell you more. It's a complex problem to understand, right?
We're going to mark that as a follow-up there and go to Chris Reynolds. Chris, what's your questions? Nope, not there. Let's go to Andy. Andy, what's your questions?
Swarna, we chatted a little bit last time and we were talking about your go-to-market strategy, and you felt like there weren't really any sales teams or other organizations out there who would represent your product really well. What type of a team, how large of a team, how much time and money do you think it will take to deploy that product once you start to get out in the market?
Yeah, I think, it is going to be an intensive sales process. I agree with you. We haven't looked at the exact numbers yet, but definitely, this is a dual strategy where you have to get the surgeon uses the device and the hospital purchases the device. And so we will need that, what we call that clinical champion. That surgeon who is interested in the device will have to go out there with some free devices, get them to use it, and then represent that device to the value analysis committee at the hospital, and then get the rest of the hospital on board to purchase this. The good news is the device is cheap to make. And so we will need a strategy of salespeople who have OR contacts to, find those surgeons. And then people, of course, who have OR hospital sales experience to send this, disposable device through the right channels to get those contracts. And so it is a complex sales channel. The good news is we have a list of surgeons who are already interested in using the device. This technology is familiar to surgeons and makes sense to them. Negative pressure wound therapy has been around 25 years. We have placed drains into abdomens after surgery for many, many years. So the concept of doing this is very familiar, even though this exact technology has not been on board. And it makes sense. We are used to seeing fluid accumulate on patients and leave. And the current supportive care, in the 3 to 7 days we wait in the hospital, the patient loses all the excess fluid that they're kind of swelled up at the end of surgery. They manifest as coming off the patient and increased urine output and bowel function returns. So that pattern, the whole management pattern, is very familiar to surgeons. And we think there's a lot of interest because, we have a lot of surgeon investors and a lot of people asking about it. But at the same time, you're correct. It will require a, internal sales group. And I think the education part is also important, not necessarily the surgeons, but to the other hospital staff. So I don't have an exact number for you, but I am aware of the complexities, right?
That's completely okay. Everything about being a startup and taking something to market is what's referred to as progressive elaboration. As you go forward, you learn more and you learn more. And if pivot is required, then you do that. But that's required. You can't have the answer to everything on day one. But I appreciate that you're aware of it.
Right. Thanks. And Martin, what's your questions?
I don't do FDA cleared hardware devices, so I won't have any interesting questions, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you for that. So that's what we have right now. Thank you so much, Swarna, for a great presentation. With that, let's go to our next presenter. We have with us Aether, first time up here. Aaron, if you'd like to launch your slides and kick off when ready. Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Hall T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.